Hey everyone, I just spent the last couple of months reviewing all of Ian Fleming's James Bond novels, and I thought I'd collect all the reviews into one convenient video. But just because I don't want to feel like outright recycling content, I thought I'd review all the short stories individually as well. Reviews are in publication order. Let's do it. Hey everyone, I just read Casino Royale by Ian Fleming, and if nothing else, I now know how to play Baccarat. A friend pointed out that in both the book Casino Royale and the movie Casino Royale, James Bond is serving the same monarch, and now you have to live with that knowledge as well. It's a book about a British secret agent and a Soviet-aligned criminal gambling for all the money at a high-stakes baccarat table. The pros? The fast pacing keeps the plot moving along. This book has issues, but I can't say I was ever bored. The gambling in spycraft was actually pretty engaging, and I really liked Felix Leiter. He's the Sam to James Bond's Frodo. The cons? Bond's, and by extension Ian Fleming's, views on women and minorities are pretty disgusting. Fleming's prose is awful, there I said it. One page in and I wanted to strangle him. And the way the villain gets dealt with feels like a pretty cheap Deus Ex Machina. It's a pretty short book, but unless you're a die-hard Bond fan and haven't already given it a read, I don't think you'll miss much if you skip it, and I'm giving Casino Royale a C. Hey everyone, I just read Live and Let Die by Ian Fleming, and man, the 1950s, am I right? You could take a shot every time this book drops a slur and you would die within the first 50 pages. It's a book about a British secret agent investigating the sudden appearance of fabled pirate gold down in the Americas. You already know why we're here. The pros? Fleming's prose has certainly improved since Casino Royale. I like the stuff about Bloody Morgan's gold and how the villains are transporting it, and there are some pretty good action scenes here, including a moment where Bond fights a giant octopus. When is that making it into the movies? The cons? The racism. Far out the racism. From the slurs to the phonetic accents to the imperialist comments on Africans, there's just no getting around it. This book is straight up racist. Solitaire, the female lead, is an awful character. Not only is she extremely passive, she's treated as a prize for Bond to win by foiling the villain. I couldn't stand her. And the pacing here is awful. It takes so long for things to kick off. Honestly, the book feels about twice as long as it actually is. This book was a chore. If you're a Bond fan, you might get something out of it by seeing what bits they picked and chose for the films over the years, but otherwise this is an easy skip. And I'm giving Live and Let Die an F. Hey everyone, I just read Moonraker by Ian Fleming and it was surprisingly readable. The movie Moonraker and the book Moonraker almost have nothing in common other than James Bond, but somehow, the double take pigeon is actually from the book. We truly live in the best timeline. It's a book about a British secret agent who's brought in to teach a card cheat a lesson at the gambling table, which leads to the discovery of a plot to destroy London. Mondays, am I right? The pros. I really liked the pacing here, how it started with M bringing Bond in to play cards at Blades and then escalated to the investigation into Hugo Drax and the Moonraker. I also really liked the mystery of Hugo Drax and his nefarious scheme here. It's pretty easy to put together, but there was some genuine intrigue to be found. And Gala Brand is easily the best female lead so far. She's active, she's competent, she helps save the day, and she's not just some prize for Bond to win. It's a shame she's never made it into the films. The cons? All that said, Gala still gets herself kidnapped, and her being active and competent doesn't stop Bond, and by extension Fleming, from objectifying her. At times, the prose makes it difficult to tell what's going on, such as when a cliff suddenly explodes. And I still don't really like Bond as a character. He's such a vile man. I was pleasantly surprised by this book. It's still a product of its time, but I'd recommend it to fans of spy thrillers, especially fans of the Bond movies if you've steered clear of the original novels. And I'm giving Moonraker a B. Hey everyone, I just read Diamonds Are Forever by Ian Fleming and it was garbage. It says so much about the 1950s that Fleming will casually throw out racial slurs but censors the word fuck. It's a book about a British secret agent who gets sent to America to investigate a diamond smuggling operation. The pros? I liked the opening chapter, I guess. It was something different at least. There was a train crash, so that was fun, especially given it reflected the state of the novel overall. And it was a mercifully short book. I managed to get through it in a couple of days. The cons? In addition to the usual racism and sexism, we can add homophobia to the series list of sins as well. Far out! The characters here are truly awful. Tiffany Case is just a prize for Bond to win, and the story behind her name is so stupid. The Spang brothers are the most boring villains yet. No wonder they haven't been adapted into the films. And Wint and Kid are just stereotypes. And this book is almost a beat-for-beat retread of Live and Let Die, but without any of the good action scenes and even worse pacing. And for that reason, Diamonds Are Forever is getting a very well-deserved F. Do not read this book. Hey everyone, I just read From Russia with Love by Ian Fleming, and it was alright. It says so much about Fleming as a person that he begins the author's note at the start with, not that it matters, but it's a book about a Soviet plot to lure a certain British secret agent into a trap in order to embarrass the UK. The prose? I like that the first 100 pages or so give focus to the villains and the female lead. Bond doesn't even show up until the second half of the book. It breaks formula, but it works. Kronstein, Rosa Klebb and Red Grant are all a breath of fresh air after the Spang brothers in terms of antagonists. And I like the sense of continuity you get reading the books that isn't really present in the films. The cons? All of Fleming's old familiars are here. Sexism, racism, homophobia, there's just no real getting around it, especially in the Romani camp. The action here is pretty subpar, and the trap set for Bond here is so obvious I actually can't believe that he bumbles right into it. Even when he escapes it, his need to gloat almost ends up getting him killed anyway. This is definitely a step up from Diamonds Are Forever, but the film adaptation runs rings around this book. Unless you're interested in reading the original Bond novels, I don't think you'll miss much by skipping it. And I'm giving From Russia with Love a C. Hey everyone, I just read Dr. No by Ian Fleming, and how is this the second Bond novel to feature a fight with a cephalopod? I'm in awe of this cover. Truly cursed. It's a book about a British secret agent who is sent to Jamaica to investigate the disappearance of two fellow intelligence officers, and somehow this leads to a man getting crushed to death by a mountain of bird poo. Yeah, this book takes a turn. The prose? The second half of this book is absolutely bonkers, and dare I say, even fun. I really liked the campy tone of this book. Dr. No and his weird robot claw hands, Honey Rider being Dr. Dolittle, a giant squid, a dragon. It's very silly, but it all worked for me. And I liked that Fleming seems to be getting over some of his odd prejudices, like treating an overly racist colonial administrator with ridicule, and letting Honey Rider escape the death trap with absolutely no help from Bond. The cons? But that doesn't mean he's completely over them. The book's still overtly racist by today's standards, and Honey Rider as a character is pretty one note. The first 100 pages of this book are so bad, it really doesn't pick up until the dragon appears. And much as I like the second half, this is still just another rehash of Live and Let Die. It's even set in the same place. I'm probably going to make a lot of people angry when I say this, but I honestly think this book is better than its film adaptation, even if that's not saying much. If you're a Bond fan, I think it's definitely worth a read to see how crazy it gets toward the end, but otherwise I think this is a safe skip, and I'm giving Dr. No a C. Hey everyone, I just read Goldfinger by Ian Fleming and it was bad. Goldfinger the movie is my favourite of the Bond films. Goldfinger the book is definitely not my favourite anything. It's a book about a secret agent who is put on a collision course with a gold-obsessed Soviet-aligned criminal. You already know why we're here. The prose? I liked the first encounter with Goldfinger where he's cheating at cards. The attention to detail in terms of continuity is pretty good here, even if that did mean bringing back the Spangled Mob. And I like the idea of James Bond going through some character development. In theory. The cons? Goldfinger's plan here, to steal all the gold in Fort Knox, is so monumentally stupid that even the film adaptation made fun of it. This is the longest Bond novel yet, but barely anything happens until the last 70 pages. The pacing here is abysmal. And Pussy Galore is a terrible character, mainly because she's just Tiffany Case again from Diamonds Are Forever, with a different name and a slightly changed backstory. This book was a serious disappointment, even by the standards of this series. There is no reason to read it when the film adaptation improves on it in basically every way, and I'm giving Goldfinger a very well-deserved F. Hey everyone, I just read Quantum of Solace, the third story of For Your Eyes Only, and this doesn't even really feel like a James Bond story. What on earth did I just read? It's a story about British secret agent James Bond being told a story by the governor of NASA about a man who married a flight attendant and the eventual collapse of their relationship. The prose? It's certainly unique from every other Bond story so far. I liked the attempt at the twist at the end. And to the story's credit, both the man and the woman are made out to be horrible people to each other in their own ways. The cons? That said, the woman is of course made out to be the instigator of the conflict. I'm not sure if the titular Quantum of Solace, the idea presented by the governor of NASA that showing a little kindness every now and then can preserve an otherwise collapsing relationship, is as universal as it is made out to be in the story, but that's just me. And while this is a unique kind of story for Bond, it's pretty stereotypical of other stories of this type. This was a weird one. I honestly don't know what to think of it. It's nothing like anything else I've read by Fleming so far, but it doesn't really play to his strengths either. And for that reason, I'm giving Quantum of Solace a C. Hey everyone, I just read the Hildebrand Rarity, the fifth and final story of For Your Eyes Only. And what is it with James Bond fighting sea creatures? What fish hurt you, Ian? It's a short story about James Bond observing a marital dispute while staying on a millionaire's yacht while on leave. Also something about a rare fish. The prose? Milton Crest is the kind of vile, misogynist, racist, imperialist dumpster fire Fleming used to come off as from his writing in earlier works, and it's nice to see how his attitudes changed over time through the framing of Crest as an irredeemable villain here, even if Fleming can't quite bring himself to make the guy English. Similarly, I like how Liz Crest is ultimately a subversion of the sorts of passive women Fleming has written before, such as Solitaire. And I like that there's a bit of a murder mystery here, especially when the murder weapon is a fish. The cons? Please Ian, you can't just keep writing more iterations of Live and Let Die. This story still comes off as racist and sexist by today's standards. And once again, Bond really has no reason to be in this story. It's not bad, it's not Fleming's best, but it's readable, and I'm giving the Hildebrand Rarity a B. Hey everyone, I just read From a View to a Kill, the first story of For Your Eyes Only, and it was okay. I like the implication in this story that every member of MI6 has a number, which begs the question, what number does M have? It's a story about the assassination of a dispatch rider carrying top secret Allied documents in France, and a British secret agent's attempts to foil any such future plots. The prose? The short length really streamlines the story and gives it a cracking pace, a real breath of fresh air after several novels with bloated pacing. I like that Bond is shown to have failed in at least one mission, even if we don't see it. It really helps to make him a bit more believable. And Marianne Russell was a fun character, short though her appearance was. The cons? This story is so outdated by this point. Imagine sending a single courier on a motorcycle to transport top secret documents in this day and age. Bond's misogyny is on full display here, and as usual it is really off-putting, even if he does get shown up for it in the end. And the action feels a little perfunctory here. I don't know, maybe that's just me. This is a good story. The short format really plays to Fleming's strengths, and I'm giving From a View to a Kill a B. Hey everyone, I just read For Your Eyes Only, the second story from the collection of the same name, and I really liked it. I know. I'm as surprised as you. It's a story about the petty murder of an old British couple living in Jamaica and the petty revenge on those responsible by M and a certain British secret agent. The prose? The opening scene of the home intrusion was really well done. The way it ratcheted up the suspense throughout was great. I really liked just how small in scope this story is. It's just a private off-the-books job, and that's a refreshing change of pace for this series. And Judy Havelock steals the story. She's great. The cons? Right up until the last few pages anyway, when of course, she has to fall into Bond's arms for no reason. This is just From a View to a Kill again, even if it is better in just about every way. And the villain, von Hammerstein, is a non-event. He sounds like he belongs in a Wolfenstein game. Even his henchmen get more character than him. Aside from the misogyny, I really enjoyed this story. It's probably Fleming at his best, at least so far, and I'm giving For Your Eyes Only a B. Hey everyone, I just read Risico, the fourth story of For Your Eyes Only, and it was alright. Oh, so it's okay for you to send Bond off on a private job, M, but as soon as the PM wants him to investigate something for him, suddenly Bond's not available. I see how it is. It's a short story about a British secret agent investigating the illicit European drug trade in order to stop the smuggling of drugs into the UK. The prose? I liked the twists and turns of this story. Its short length kept it from getting mired in the usual problems of Bond's travelogue-style stories, and the shootout at the end was fun. The cons? Liesl is just another prize for Bond to win at the end of the story. This plot almost feels too complicated to tell well within the confines of a short story, and the framing device just feels like an excuse to get Bond into place for the story to start. M's definitely right about this not being his usual kind of job, but whatever, that's just me nitpicking. The story's fine, it's got all of Fleming's strengths and most of his weaknesses too. It's pretty much a Bond novel in microcosm, and I'm giving Risico a C. Hey everyone, I just read For Your Eyes Only by Ian Fleming and it was actually alright. How have there been so many instances of James Bond fighting sea creatures at this point and yet not a single one of them has made it into the movies? It's a collection of 5 short stories about a British secret agent's smaller in scope missions and misadventures while on leave. The prose, For Your Eyes Only, the story for which the collection is named, is Fleming at his best. It is a surprisingly good read. Judy Havelock, Marianne Russell and Elizabeth Crest are all better written than Fleming's usual passive damsels. And the pacing of all these stories is really good. Bond really suits short fiction. The cons? From a View to a Kill and For Your Eyes Only are basically the same story in terms of plot and pacing, which is especially noticeable given they're right next to each other. Liesl from Risico is once again treated as nothing more than a prize for Bond to win at the end of the story, and Quantum of Solace really didn't do anything for me. Overall, this was actually a pretty decent read. Fleming's writing really suits shorter fiction. I'd actually recommend it if you're looking for some classic spy thrillers, and I'm giving For Your Eyes Only a B. Hey everyone, I just read Thunderball by Ian Fleming, and this is the third freaking book where Bond fights a cephalopod. Spectre is introduced in this book. Spectre's symbol is an octopus, and Ian Fleming always said that once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, but thrice is enemy action. Ergo, Cthulhu wants James Bond dead. It's a book about... oh, hang on. There we are. It's a book about a British secret agent sent to foil the plot of a group of independent nuclear terrorists calling themselves Spectre. The pros. Spectre finally gets its introduction here, and they are compelling villains. I really like the spycraft and espionage on display here, gadgets and all, and the climactic battle was a lot of fun, especially the octopus. The cons? The start of this book where Bond goes to a health resort has no reason to be there. It serves no purpose, and the only good thing to come out of it is that it turns Bond into a hippie for a chapter or two afterward. I can tell Fleming is trying to do better with Domino than the female leads of previous books, but she's still the villain's kept woman who is reduced to a tortured damsel by the end, even if she does get the final word. And this is the fourth, maybe fifth time I've read Live and Let Die, and I am just so over it at this point. That said, this is one of the better iterations of that story. I actually think it's better than at least one of its film adaptations, and while not great, I'd recommend it if you're looking for a classic spy thriller, or if you're interested in Bond's literary origins, and I'm giving Thunderball a C. Hey everyone, I just read The Living Daylights, the third story of Octopussy and the Living Daylights, and it was pretty fun. Never mess with a cellist. I'm speaking from experience here. It's a short story about a British secret agent trying to protect someone defecting from the Soviet Union from an unknown assassin. The pros? I really liked the tension of the assassin versus assassin conflict here. I really liked the use of an orchestral performance in this story too. And its short length really plays to Fleming's strengths as a writer. The cons? The ending strikes me as a little sexist. It seems a bit weird that Bond wouldn't kill the Soviet assassin just because she's an attractive woman. It doesn't really have an ending, it just sort of stops. And the way it used the title made me cringe into a black hole. It's just a fun little story, nothing more, nothing less. And I'm giving The Living Daylights a B. Hey everyone, I just read The Spy Who Loved Me by Ian Fleming, and when I told my mother that this book was Fleming trying to write from a woman's perspective, she laughed, and laughed, and laughed, and laughed. And I don't think she's ever stopped. I love that Vivian Michelle is listed as a co-author on the edition I read, like she's a real person. What is that about? It's a book about a young Canadian woman minding a hotel in the middle of nowhere, New York State, who is menaced by a pair of gangsters, and whose only hope of survival might just be a certain British secret agent with a flat tire. The pros? Say what you will about this book, and there is a lot to say, but at least it's not yet another iteration of Live and Let Die. The small scope and stakes of the story give it a kind of realism over the previous books that I actually really enjoyed. Unlike just about every other story in the series so far, I could actually believe the events of this one happening. And Vivian Michelle is a compelling protagonist. I'm glad that the book takes her side over that of the vile men she encounters throughout the story and doesn't judge her for some of her decisions that even today would be considered controversial. The cons? That said, this is still Ian Fleming, so there are still some aspects of how he thinks women think that are just hilarious, such as worrying if she's been rendered infertile immediately after getting struck by lightning. The first part of the book where Vivian recounts the sequence of events that led her to taking the job at the motel were repetitive and boring, and most of the villains who, due to their believability, come off as much more vile than antagonists like Le Chiffre or even Blofeld, get away with no comeuppance, which is kind of annoying. Fleming took a huge gamble with this book, and for the most part I think it actually paid off. It's really nothing like the rest of the series. I'd almost recommend it just for how unique it is. Just be aware going in, Fleming's views are definitely outdated by today's standards. And I'm giving The Spy Who Loved Me a B. I know, I'm surprised as well. Hey everyone, I just read On Her Majesty's Secret Service by Ian Fleming, and you can really tell we've finally caught up to the start of the film adaptations because suddenly James Bond is a proud Scot. It was okay though, and hey, at least it's not Live and Let Die again. It's a book about a British secret agent sent to the Swiss Alps to investigate the operation of an at-large supercriminal after having foiled the criminal's previous plot 2 books ago. The pros? I like Blofeld's plan here. It's nonsense if you think about it for more than a minute, but it was fun. I liked the in media res opening of the story. It was a nice change of pace. And Blofeld himself remains a compelling villain. The cons? The climax was a real letdown. After all the build-up for the assault on Blofeld's lair, the battle is over within a page. There was a lot of talk about heraldry, which really just felt like Fleming flexing his obscure knowledge muscles. And I really hate the way Tracy is used in this book. The relationship between her and Bond is so rushed, and then she just gets stuffed in the fridge 5 seconds after they marry. It's awful. This is a decent read. The 60s really have mellowed Fleming out. If you're looking for a classic spy thriller, there might be something here for you, but like most of these books, I don't think it's an essential read. And I'm giving On Her Majesty's Secret Service a C. Hey everyone, I just read 007 in New York, the fourth and final story of Octopussy and the Living Daylights, and, what the hell did I just read? If this was written because American publishers thought Fleming was too harsh on New York in a different essay this was originally bundled with, I can't imagine how scathing he must have been in that other piece of writing. It's a short story about a British secret agent going on a trip to New York in order to warn a woman that her boyfriend is a Soviet spy. The pros? The inclusion of Felix Leiter's scrambled eggs recipe hit me like a truck, but I am here for it. It was very short, and I liked the way it ended. The cons? The travelogue sections of the Bond books are my least favourite parts, and this story is just nothing but that. This story is so inconsequential, it adds nothing, there is no reason to read it. And there's just no conflict here. This is a nothing story. The best thing to come out of it is Felix Leiter's scrambled eggs recipe, and for that reason 007 in New York just barely scrapes by with a D. Hey everyone, I just read The Property of a Lady, the second story of Octopussy and the Living Daylights, and it was alright. If nothing else, it sent me down a rabbit hole about the history of Fabergé eggs. It's a short story about a British secret agent trying to catch a Soviet spy during an auction for a very expensive Fabergé egg. The pros? I liked the setting of the auction house. I really liked the focus on spycraft over action, and the conflict here was actually pretty interesting. The cons? The prose is pretty poor here. A lot of this story is just spent setting up the conflict. It is very convoluted for such a short piece of writing. And it doesn't really have an ending, it just sort of stops. It's an okay story, I don't regret reading it, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you're really invested in James Bond, and I'm giving The Property of a Lady a C. Hey everyone, I just read You Only Live Twice by Ian Fleming, who it turns out was a massive unrepentant weeb. Man, Kissy Suzuki is one kinky girl. It's a book about a British secret agent sent out to Japan to investigate the mysterious Dr. Guntram Shatterhand, who of course is none other than his old enemy Blofeld. The pros? Even though the final confrontation between Bond and Blofeld is brief, it is a satisfying end to their ongoing conflict. It was nice to have a Bond story set somewhere in East Asia. It was a very welcome change of scenery. And I liked Bond's obituary at the end. He's not actually dead, but it's well written and I thought it was quite poignant. The cons? It may not be yet another iteration of Live and Let Die, but it is certainly a beat-for-beat rehash of Dr. No, complete with the second half just jumping off the rails. Blofeld's almost a parody of himself here. He was a cool and calculating man who managed to fly under the radar in his previous appearances, but here he's just a screaming megalomaniac, set up in an evil lair filled with poison plants and piranha traps. It's so over the top that even the book notes how much he's changed. And as usual, Fleming's views are pretty outdated. He may have had more respect for Japan in this book than he did for Africans or Middle Easterners or Indigenous Australians, but it still comes off as Orientalist at best and racist at worst. Case in point, no Japanese castle would ever be built by the sea. This one was pretty middle of the road. I don't have much to say about it, and for that reason I'm giving You Only Live Twice a C. Hey everyone, I just read The Man with the Golden Gun by Ian Fleming, and it was pretty meh. Fleming died after completing the first draft, and yeah, it shows. It's a book about a British secret agent sent, yet again, to Jamaica to take out a dangerous assassin in order to prove to his superiors that he's not a Russian agent. The pros? The idea of Bond being brainwashed into a Russian agent between books and sent to kill him is really interesting. It's a shame it wasn't given more focus. I really liked that the female lead here is actually a character from several of the previous books, Mary Goodnight, and the climax was a moment of excitement in an otherwise dull story. The cons? Scaramanga, the titular man with the golden gun, was a real bore of a villain. Like I mentioned before, the book just glosses over its more creative ideas like Bond being brainwashed, and even worse than being a copy of Live and Let Die, this book is a copy of Diamonds Are Forever. The 60s may have mellowed Fleming, but he'd clearly run out of ideas by this point. You won't miss anything by giving it a skip, and I'm giving The Man with the Golden Gun a D. Hey everyone, I just read Octopussy, the first story in Octopussy and the Living Daylights, and it was meh. It's barely even a James Bond story. It's a short story about a British secret agent living in Jamaica, surprisingly not 007, with a dark secret from his past fighting in World War II, and then he gets eaten alive by an octopus. This isn't a joke. The pros? Fleming has Stockholm syndromed me into enjoying his bizarre obsession with people fighting cephalopods. And even better, like I said, the octopus wins. As always, it was fascinating to see James Bond from an outside perspective, and Smythe's dark secret, that he killed a man to steal some Nazi gold for himself, is actually pretty interesting. The cons? This barely counts as a Bond story. He's present for maybe 2 pages at most. In some ways, this is just a rehash of Quantum of Solace, and Dexter Smythe, aside from his dark secret, isn't a particularly interesting protagonist. This is a bizarre story, only memorable because it has a man-eating octopus. Now that you know that, I've saved you the trouble of having to read it, and I'm giving Octopussy a C. Hey everyone, I just read Octopussy and the Living Daylights by Ian Fleming, and man, what a weird note to end on. I dare Eon Productions to call the next James Bond film 007 in New York. Go on, you know you want to. It's a collection of 4 short stories detailing some of James Bond's quieter missions. The pros? Octopussy is the culmination of Fleming's bizarre obsession with people fighting cephalopods, and you know what, at this point I'm here for it. The Living Daylights was the best of the collection. I liked the urgency of the conflict and the use of the orchestra as the cover for the Soviet assassin. And I love that one of the stories includes an actual recipe from Felix Leiter of all people. The cons? I'm not really sure why Bond is included in Octopussy. He's very inconsequential to the plot. In fact, you could cut him out and nothing would change. Aside from the Living Daylights, these really are the dregs of Fleming's creativity, even if their brevity keeps him from getting lost in the source. And 007 in New York is a nothing story. It's such a bizarre choice to end the collection on. This book just feels like nothing. It's not good, it's not bad, it simply is. You will gain nothing if you read it and miss nothing if you don't. And for that reason, I'm giving Octopussy and the Living Daylights a C. And just to round it out, one more for the road. Hey everyone, I just read all the James Bond books by Ian Fleming and I was not impressed. Yeah, most of these books were really not for me. It's a series about a British secret agent fighting to protect the Western world from Soviet spies and international supercriminals. The pros? About the only thing the books have over the films, at least until the Craig era, is their sense of continuity. I really liked the way characters and events kept getting brought back. I loved it when the books let loose and embraced the camp, such as how people just kept on having fights with sea creatures. And I liked that Fleming was willing to take the occasional risk, such as with Quantum of Solace or The Spy Who Loved Me. The cons? Fleming is not a good writer. He did improve over time, but his prose is nothing to write home about. These books are very repetitive. The plot of Live and Let Die is reused so many times I lost count by the end. And they are extremely outdated. The amount of casual racism, homophobia and misogyny in these books is shocking, and it all really lessened my enjoyment of the books. Overall, these books might be classics of the spy thriller genre, but aside from 1 or 2 entries, the film series improves on the stories in almost every way. I'd only recommend them to die-hard fans. And I'm giving Ian Fleming's James Bond books a D. Sorry. And there we go. Every single Ian Fleming Bond story reviewed, and here they are ranked. The asterisks are the ones I think are better than their film adaptations. And that's it. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more, please consider leaving a reading suggestion down in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.